before most people even realize what they're revealing, and INFJ has already connected the dots. They don't need dramatic confessions or long conversations. They read micro expressions, emotional patterns, and the subtle energy behind your words. To an INFJ, people are puzzles that solve themselves through tone, timing, and behavior. And by the time others are still guessing, the INFJ already understands who you are, what you feel, and what you're trying to hide. What makes this so unnerving is how quietly it happens. The INFJ never announces their insight. They don't confront, brag, or expose what they know. Instead, they step back mentally and begin watching the situation like a film playing in slow motion. They notice shifts in your motivations, contradictions in your stories, and emotions you haven't admitted to yourself yet. To them, nothing is random. Everything is part of a larger psychological pattern. And once they recognize that pattern, they see the whole picture with astonishing clarity. But here's the twist: they won't use this knowledge against you. The INFJ's intuition isn't a weapon, it's a filter. Once they figure you out, they decide quietly whether to let you in, keep you at a distance, or close the door entirely. And most people never realize a decision has already been made. If you want to understand how INFJs see the world and how they see you, make sure you subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind for more deep psychological insights. And drop the word figured in the comments if you want the full breakdown of all seven signs. Their responses become more precise, as if they're answering the emotion, not the words. When an INFJ has figured you out, the entire rhythm of their communication shifts. They stop responding to the literal sentences you speak and begin responding to the truth beneath them. The fear you didn't name, the insecurity you tried to hide, the longing you covered with a joke. Their replies land with unsettling precision, touching the exact emotional layer you hoped no one would notice. You might ask a simple question, and they'll answer the real question hidden underneath it. You might make a casual remark, and they'll respond to the intention behind it. It feels almost psychic, but it's not. It's the INFJ reading between every breath, every pause, every unspoken feeling. When they reply, you feel exposed without understanding why, because they're not talking to the persona you present. They're talking to the truth you carry. This precision becomes the INFJ's quiet signal that they've mapped your emotional landscape. They know where your voice tightens when you lie, where your eyes soften when you care, where your tone betrays what you're trying not to feel. And instead of confronting you, they calibrate their responses with surgical accuracy, gentle when you're fragile, firm when you're hiding, distant when your motives shift. It's in these moments that you realize the INFJ isn't guessing, they're aware. Their words begin to feel like mirrors, reflecting back parts of you that you haven't fully acknowledged. And once an INFJ reaches this level of clarity, you're no longer just speaking to them. You're speaking through them, because they've already understood the emotional truth you were never planning to say aloud. They stop asking surface questions and start asking the ones that hit your core. When an INFJ has already figured you out, their questions evolve into something far deeper than casual conversation. They no longer bother with small talk, routine details, or the polite dance most people rely on to stay comfortable. Instead, they begin asking questions that land directly in the center of your emotional truth. Questions that bypass defenses, ignore rehearsed answers, and illuminate the parts of you you've carefully kept in the shadows. Their curiosity becomes surgical but never aggressive. They simply guide the conversation toward places that reveal who you really are. Why does that matter to you? What were you really hoping for? When did you start feeling that way? These questions don't just gather information, they expose patterns. And suddenly, you find yourself revealing more than you expected, because their calm presence makes honesty feel natural, even when it's uncomfortable. It's in those moments you realize they aren't discovering you, they already have. They're just giving you the chance to hear yourself clearly. This shift is subtle but unmistakable. An INFJ who asks deep questions isn't seeking answers, they're confirming what they already know. They've watched the way your tone changes when you talk about certain people. They've noticed the emotions you try to swallow before responding. They've registered every contradiction between your words and your behavior. And now, their questions target the exact pressure points where your truth lives. They ask the kind of questions that make you pause, rethink, or even feel exposed. Not because they're intrusive, but because they're accurate. It feels like they're holding up a mirror you didn't realize existed, reflecting back motivations, fears, and desires you rarely articulate. When an INFJ reaches this stage, you're no longer speaking to someone who's trying to understand you. You're speaking to someone who already does and is guiding you toward understanding yourself. They adjust their energy around you because they've already mapped your intentions. Once an INFJ has decoded your intentions, the real ones, not the polished ones you show the world, their entire energetic posture around you shifts. They no longer interact based on what you say you want, they interact based on what they know you're actually aiming for. If your intentions are genuine, their energy opens effortlessly. Warmer tone, softer eye contact, deeper presence. But if your motives carry pressure, manipulation, self interest, or emotional inconsistency, the INFJ's energy tightens with surgical precision. They become quieter, more observant, less reachable. It's not a reaction, it's calibration. They are aligning themselves to the truth they've already seen in you. Their sensitivity is so attuned that even the slightest shift in your intent subtly reorganizes the way they sit, speak, breathe, and emotionally position themselves. To others, the change is invisible. To the INFJ, it is instinct. This energetic adjustment is the clearest sign they've figured you out, because INFJs don't waste emotional resources on dynamics that don't align with their values. If they sense sincerity, they lean in, not impulsively, but with unmistakable trust. If they sense caution, they proceed with gentle distance. And if they sense danger, ego, deceit, emotional hunger, they create an invisible barrier around themselves. Their presence becomes lighter, harder to penetrate, almost impossible to influence. They won't announce this shift or explain it. They don't need confrontation or confirmation. They already know the emotional psychology behind your behavior, and they're responding with intuitive precision. By the time you notice the INFJ feels different around you, the truth is simple. They've already understood who you are, and their energy is now interacting with that truth, not the version of yourself you tried to present. They anticipate your reactions before you make them. When an INFJ has truly figured you out, your reactions stop being surprises and start becoming predictable patterns they've already mapped in advance. They study people the way some study languages: tone, rhythm, emotional cadence, instinctive defenses, silent longings. So, by the time you respond to something, the INFJ has already seen the response forming in the spaces between your words. They know when you're about to withdraw, when you're about to deflect, when a topic will unsettle you, or when praise will make you soften. It isn't manipulation, it's mastery of emotional pattern recognition. They've watched the subtle tension that enters your shoulders before you disagree, the slight hesitation before you admit something vulnerable, the shift in your breathing when you're trying to impress. To them, human behavior is a series of predictable emotional tells, and once they've deciphered yours, your reactions become as clear as a script they've already read. This anticipation allows the INFJ to navigate the interaction with a kind of quiet, psychological grace. They adopt their timing, their tone, even their pauses based on the reaction they know is coming. They don't view conflict before it erupts, soften their words before they land too sharply, or shift the conversation away from topics you're not ready to face. And if your motives are less pure, they become even more precise, protecting themselves in advance, refusing to give emotional fuel, shutting down sensitive paths before you attempt to steer them there. By the time you feel the urge to react, the INFJ has already accounted for it and positioned themselves accordingly. It's not intuition alone, it's accumulated understanding. Because once an INFJ sees your internal pattern, they don't just understand how you respond, they understand why. And that knowledge makes your next move visible long before you make it. They become noticeably quieter, observing instead of participating. When an INFJ has fully understood who you are and what drives you, their energy shifts in a way most people misinterpret. They become quieter, not out of shyness, withdrawal, or discomfort, but because the need to figure you out has ended. Silence becomes their vantage point. Instead of engaging to gather information, they sit back, as if stepping into a higher balcony of awareness, watching the subtle mechanics of your behavior unfold effortlessly. Their eyes track microexpressions, tone changes, contradictions, and emotional cues with surgical precision. Every word you speak becomes data. Every pause becomes a crossroads. Their silence is not passive, it is diagnostic. And the more they understand, the less they feel compelled to speak. The room shifts around them. People often start to feel exposed without knowing why. Because the INFJ's quiet presence creates an atmosphere where truth rises to the surface on its own. In these quieter moments, the INFJ is no longer participating in the flow of the interaction. They are analyzing its structure. They are mapping your emotional patterns, predicting your next moves, and identifying the motives beneath your words. Their withdrawal is not distance, it is clarity. Speaking becomes unnecessary because insight has already formed, and this shift is often the clearest sign that they've understood something fundamental about you, something you may not have admitted out loud. They don't use this knowledge to manipulate or control. They use it to choose their next steps with precision. Whether they decide to deepen the connection, protect themselves, or quietly detach, their silence is the space where the decision crystallizes. And by the time you notice how quiet they've become, the INFJ has already reached a level of understanding most people never see coming. They stop being influenced by your behavior, meaning you can no longer manipulate their emotions. When an INFJ has fully understood your patterns, a profound shift happens inside them. Your behavior no longer has emotional leverage. The compliments you once used to soften them, the guilt you relied on to sway them, the tension you created to provoke a reaction, all of it loses its power instantly. It's as if a switch flips in their mind and the emotional cords connecting your behavior to their feelings are quietly unplugged. They stop reacting and start observing. They stop absorbing and start analyzing. Where they once felt the impact of your moods, they now study them with the same calm precision as a psychologist watching a case unfold. This emotional neutrality isn't coldness, it is mastery. The INFJ has stepped out of the emotional arena entirely, leaving behind a version of themselves that could once be swayed. And the moment your behavior stops shaping their internal state is the moment all manipulation collapses. This detachment is not dramatic or angry. It's quiet, controlled, and absolute. They no longer feel pulled to defend themselves, explain their feelings, or smooth the tension in the room. Instead, they move through the interaction with a clear-eyed steadiness that unsettles anyone who once relied on their emotional responsiveness. You might raise your voice, retreat into silence, use charm, or shift the narrative. But none of it lands. The INFJ's inner world becomes sealed, protected by a clarity that cannot be negotiated. And in this state, they make decisions from a place of pure insight, not emotion. They see the truth of who you are, what you want, and what the dynamic has become. When an INFJ reaches this point, manipulation not only stops working, it becomes transparent. They are no longer influenced, controlled, or emotionally moved. They have already chosen the version of themselves who will move forward without you steering anything ever again. They treat you differently, either more open or more distant, depending on what they discovered. When an INFJ finally understands who you are beneath the surface, something subtle but unmistakable shifts in the way they treat you. If what they discovered aligns with sincerity, integrity, and emotional safety, they open like a long locked door, finally recognizing the right key. Their energy becomes warmer, their presence more consistent, their insights more personal. They begin sharing pieces of their inner world, not in dramatic confessions, but in small, meaningful revelations they reserve only for people who feel safe. Their guard lowers not because they suddenly trust you, but because they've evaluated your intentions and found nothing threatening in the emotional patterns you reveal. Conversation flows with ease, vulnerability feels natural, and their intuition starts working with you rather than around you. When the INFJ opens, it is never accidental. It is a deliberate decision to welcome you into a space few ever see. But if what they discovered points to manipulation, unreliability, or emotional danger, their entire approach changes quietly but decisively. They become distant, not rude, not cold, just unreachable. Their responses flatten, their availability decreases, and the emotional warmth they previously offered disappears like light withdrawing from a room. They no longer share, no longer invest, no longer offer intuitive understanding as freely as before. Instead, they interact with a kind of precise politeness that keeps you at arm's length. It's not punishment, it's protection. They have already seen the ending of the story and are simply adjusting the distance accordingly. Whether they open or withdraw, the shift is permanent, aligned with what they've learned. And the moment you feel that change, that expansion, or that distance, you're witnessing the INFJ's final verdict on who you truly are in their world. Once an INFJ figures you out, there is no going back. They don't need proof, confrontation, or explanations. Their clarity arrives quietly, and their decision forms in silence. Whether they open the door wider or close it softly, their choice is final because it's built on truth, not impulse. And most people never realize when that moment happened, only that everything feels different now. If you want more breakdowns of the hidden psychology behind INFJs, their intuition, their boundaries, their emotional radar, make sure you subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind so you never miss a deep dive. Before you go, drop the word seen in the comments if you've ever figured someone out long before they realized it.